How many of you have had an idea for an invention or a business? Perhaps you thought of it while driving or taking a shower. Let's see a show of hands. Okay, that's more than I expected. Now, how many of you actually followed through? A considerably smaller group. Well, you're not alone. Long before smartphones came out, my mom had an idea to create a device combining the phone and the camera. But alas, she didn't pursue it. She could have been like Steve Jobs, but instead owns an iPhone today. Even though over 250 people on the Forbes 400 list founded a company, entrepreneurship is not just about accumulating wealth. It is also an opportunity to tackle some of the world's most pressing problems, like learning poverty and climate change. Or it can even be used to solve day-to-day problems, like finding the right makeup. When I went to buy makeup for the very first time, it was a nightmare. I went to store after store after store, but I just couldn't find a foundation to match my skin tone. Some stores didn't even carry the darker shades, which resulted in me looking like Casper the Ghost. Do you all know who else recognized this issue? The singer Rihanna. In 2017, Rihanna launched Fenty Beauty with the goal of it being a quality makeup line that would work for a range of skin tones, including mine. Rihanna developed a solution to a problem that many experience by using entrepreneurship. Around 60% of Americans have had an idea to start a business, with over 30% having multiple ideas. But here is the problem. Less than 10% of those with business ideas ended up taking any action. This is surprising considering that entrepreneurship is a hallmark of the American dream. So why does the entrepreneurial attitude diminish? The most common reason is a lack of funding. This stops over 3/5 of potential innovators from pursuing their ideas. One of the most notable forms of funding for a business is venture capital. It's where investors provide founders with money in exchange for a percentage of the company. I hope you've been paying attention to what I've been saying so far. If not, now's the time to start, because we're about to get into it. The venture capital industry deployed over $620 billion in 2021. But as a woman of color who works in the venture capital space, I've seen firsthand that venture funding is still not accessible to many. Half of the world's population is female, and over 80% are people of color. Hence, it's concerning that over 75% of companies that raised venture funding have no female founders. Black and Latinx founders receive just 2.6% of all venture funding. And listen to this. Women of color entrepreneurs receive less than 1%. This is unacceptable. So how do we fix the gender and racial gaps in venture funding? First is to hire more diverse venture capital investors. Currently, 93% of venture capital dollars are controlled by white males. By having more people of color and women venture capitalists, the checks they write will be less likely to fund homogeneous businesses. Second, investors must confront their biases. Once, a male coworker told me that he did not like to invest in female-focused companies as he couldn't try the products himself. I found this disturbing, especially because he had just invested in a pet food company. Third, venture capital should have no boundaries. The industry has largely been reserved for developed countries. The US accounts for nearly half of all venture capital activity. Emerging economies have relatively young populations, which are ripe for transformation. So entrepreneurship should be promoted to capitalize on these demographic trends. Even in the US, entrepreneurial activity is most prominent in 3 states. Any guesses? Yep, you got one. Oh, I hear a couple more as well. It's the usual culprits: California, New York, and Massachusetts. This leaves behind most of the country, especially rural areas. Cultivating entrepreneurship in new ecosystems removes traditional barriers and unleashes potential for generations to come. And speaking of generations, let's now discuss how to encourage young innovators from all backgrounds. We could start by highlighting more diverse role models. When looking at some of the world's topmost entrepreneurs, like Mark Zuckerberg, Evan Spiegel, and Jack Dorsey, it's evident that the norm for innovators is currently white, male, and American, and also a really boring sense of fashion. Going forward, we must make entrepreneurship representative of all genders, races, and backgrounds, so that any person can envision themselves as an entrepreneur. Another avenue to increase confidence in budding innovators is by making education entrepreneurship friendly. Do you all think that financial and digital literacy should begin in schools? I agree. Basic technical and money management skills are vital for all, entrepreneur or not. Just last week, Florida became the largest state to mandate financial literacy coursework in high schools. Hopefully, many more states will follow. To make innovation more tangible, I encourage what I call minovations, or mini innovations. Starting a business can be daunting, especially if you're naturally risk-averse, like most people. So I encourage starting small. For example, if you are a student, you could start by forming a club at your school. This way, the next time you have a viable business idea, you won't be as afraid to take that leap of faith and execute your idea. We're definitely not the target audience, but some of you may be familiar with the children's cartoon show, Minnie's Bowtunes. It follows Minnie Mouse and Daisy Duck as they open and expand their store, Minnie's Boutique, which, you guessed it, is a boutique selling bows. The episodes showcase the highs and lows of entrepreneurship. But through it all, Minnie remains enthusiastic and dedicated to her company. And this isn't just some Disney fairy tale. Multiple studies have found that business owners are happier than their salaried counterparts. So perhaps the most enticing draw of starting your own company is the happiness gained from pursuing your passion. And don't you think this happiness should be enjoyed by many more? Just for this reason alone, innovation needs to be inclusive. Let me check with you again. How many of you here will now go after your business and invention ideas? That's what I like to see. Entrepreneurship should be accessible and attainable for anyone and everyone. Innovation shouldn't be the American dream. It should be the American norm. Thank you.